The air was still, as though the ocean itself feared to disturb Ayla's presence. She stood amidst the ruins of the battlefield, the shimmering vines encasing the captured beast, pulsing faintly with divine energy. Ogun and Ikenga stood a short distance away, their breaths heavy with the aftermath of their rush to the scene. The god of iron was the first to speak. "Did you fight them alone?" Ogun asked, his voice low and edged with disbelief. His hammer, so often the answer to conflict, now felt unnecessary in his hands. Ala turned her gaze toward him, her expression calm but unyielding. "It was necessary," she replied. Her voice carried the weight of the earth, steady and absolute. "These beasts came not as hunters, but as thieves. They sought not to conquer, but to steal what they could never create." Ikenga stepped forward, his broad frame radiating quiet awe. His ram horns gleamed faintly in the light of Ala's aura. "And you subdued them," he said, more a statement than a question. "You faced them as they carried pieces of the Anti-Creator's essence, and you still stood victorious." Ala inclined her head slightly. "Their strength was immense, but strength alone is not enough against the earth." She turned her gaze to the captured beast, her vines tightening imperceptibly around its form. "This one will answer for what it is." The beast emitted a low, guttural sound, its orb fragment pulsing faintly. Even in its subdued state, the fragment exuded a sinister energy, a constant reminder of its origin. Ogun narrowed his eyes, gripping his hammer tightly. "What do you plan to do with it?" he asked. Ala's eyes softened, though her resolve did not waver. "I will study it. The answers we seek lie within the corruption it carries." She paused, glancing toward Idemili, who remained at the edge of the battlefield. "But first, the injured must be healed." Idemili's form shimmered faintly, her divine presence weakened but unbroken. As Ala approached her, the ocean goddess raised a hand. "Do not speak of taking me to your domain, sister," Idemili said, her voice firm despite the strain it carried. "The ocean is mine to protect. If I leave, it will rebel, and those imprisoned in its depths may rise." Ala hesitated, her expression unreadable. "You have fought well, but you are gravely wounded. The waters cannot hold you if you fall." Idemili shook her head, the waves rising gently behind her as though affirming her resolve. "I will not fall. Heal me here within my waters. Let the ocean cradle me as it always has." A faint smile touched Ala's lips, though it carried a hint of sadness. "You are as stubborn as ever." "As are you," Idemili replied. Ala raised her hand, and the earth responded. Roots and vines emerged from the ocean floor, wrapping gently around Idemili's form. They glowed with a soft green light, their energy flowing into the goddess's body. The ocean guard watched in silence, their reverence palpable. When the light faded, Idemili stood taller, her presence stronger. She met Ala's gaze and nodded. "Thank you, sister." Ala inclined her head. "Rest now. The ocean still needs you." With that, Ala turned to Ogun and Ikenga. "Come," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "We have work to do." The two gods followed her as she began to ascend from the ocean's depths. As they rose, Ikenga glanced at Ogun, his voice low. "I have seen many things, but never have I seen power like hers." Ogun grunted, his grip tightening on his hammer. "She is the earth, Ikenga. What we move and fight upon, she commands it." The three gods emerged from the ocean, leaving behind the recovering warriors of Idemili and the silent waves. In Ayla's realm, the captured beast would soon face the scrutiny of the earth's goddess, but even as they moved toward their next task, unease lingered in the air. For deep in the oceans, where light could not reach, the other two beasts had vanished into the shadows, and far away, in a realm forgotten by the gods, the trickster began to feel the weight of his creation slipping from his control. The trickster stood at the center of his lair, a twisted domain of shadow and shifting illusions. The walls pulsed faintly with light that didn't seem to belong, as if reality itself was being bent and broken by his presence. He paced furiously, his staff clutched tightly in one hand, its obsidian surface etched with glowing runes that pulsed in time with his erratic movements. The beasts had failed. The two that had returned stood at the edges of the chamber, their monstrous forms hunched in submission. Their glowing veins dimmed as the energy of the orb fragments pulsed weakly, struggling to regain its former strength. "You had one task," the trickster hissed, his voice sharp as broken glass. "One simple task." He slammed the base of his staff against the ground, and the room shifted around him, the shadows bending to his fury. The beasts made no sound. They could not. They had no words, no will of their own, but their silence only deepened the trickster's rage. "You were made to be unstoppable," he continued, his voice rising. "You carry fragments of the Anti-Creator's power, and yet you allowed yourselves to be broken by her." His words hung in the air, but the beasts did not move. A faint ripple passed through the chamber, and the trickster froze. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to him it felt like a knife sliding between his ribs. It was not the ripple of power that came from his orb fragments. It was something else. Something stronger. He turned sharply, his gaze snapping to the far corner of the room where the third beast should have stood. The one Allah had captured. "Gone," he muttered, his voice trembling. He clutched his staff tighter, his knuckles whitening. Captured, studied. He began to pace again, his mind racing. She will know. She will unravel everything. Another ripple passed through the air, stronger this time. It seemed to emanate from the ground itself, and for a moment, the trickster's illusionary world flickered. The shadows around him recoiled, as though something had pierced their veil. "No," he whispered, his eyes darting toward the source of the disturbance. "Not now, not yet." The air around him grew heavy, pressing against him like a storm building on the horizon. He felt it before he saw it, the raw, uncontained power radiating from the center of his domain. The very fabric of his lair seemed to twist and groan, struggling to contain it. And then he heard the voice. It was not a voice of words or language, but of intent. It spoke not to his ears, but to his very essence, a low, resonant vibration that shook him to his core. "You fear her." The trickster turned slowly, his breath catching in his throat. In the center of the chamber, where the shadows had coiled the tightest, a figure began to form. It was not fully realized, its edges flickering and unstable, but its presence was undeniable. The shadow beings. The trickster swallowed hard, his throat dry. You are not ready." The figure tilted its head, its form shifting with a sound like cracking stone. "And yet I stir," it said, its voice deep and unrelenting. "Because you falter." The trickster took a step back, his staff trembling in his hand. "It is not faltering. It is strategy. These things take time." The shadow being's form shifted closer, its edges sharpening as if the force of its will was beginning to stabilize. "Time is not on your side," it said. "You speak of strategy, but you act in fear. You allowed them to escape." The trickster's jaw clenched, his frustration boiling over. "You think I wanted this? Do you know what she is? What she carries? Allah is not. She is nothing." The shadow beings interrupted, its voice cutting through the tricksters like thunder. "She is the earth, and the earth can break." The trickster's eyes narrowed, his fear giving way to anger. "You underestimate her, and you overestimate yourself," the shadow beings replied. The chamber trembled as its form grew more defined, its presence pressing against the trickster's mind like a tidal wave. "You created these creatures to serve me, but they are failures. Weak. You have wasted my power." The trickster's grip tightened on his staff, his knuckles white, not knowing that the voice he has been hearing is a projection of the anti-creator from his cage. "Weak," he spat. "I gave them fragments of the orb. I wove them from the essence of the anti-creator. They are not weak." The shadow being's form leaned closer, its gaze unrelenting. And yet they failed. The words struck the trickster harder than any blow. He looked away, his mind spiraling as the shadow being's presence pressed down on him. He had built this plan piece by piece, carefully crafting every element, and now it was unraveling before his eyes. But even as doubt gnawed at him, an idea began to form. "You said the earth can break," he said softly, his voice regaining some of its sharpness. The shadow beings said nothing, but the faintest ripple of approval passed through the air. The trickster straightened, his eyes narrowing as his mind raced. If Allah can break, so can the others. She is not the only pillar holding this world together. If we shatter them one by one, the balance will crumble. And when balance falls, chaos reigns. The shadow beings finished, its voice a low growl of satisfaction. The trickster nodded, a faint smile creeping onto his lips. Yes, chaos will reign, but first, we need more beasts, more power. We need the other fragments. The shadow being's form began to fade, its voice echoing as it disappeared. "Do not fail again, trickster. If you do, it will not be Ayla you should fear." As the presence vanished, the trickster exhaled shakily. He turned to the two remaining beasts, their forms still hunched in submission. "Get up!" he snapped, his voice sharp as a whip. The beasts rose slowly, their glowing veins pulsing faintly. The trickster stepped closer, his staff thrumming with energy. "We are not finished," he said, his eyes burning with renewed determination. "Allah thinks she has won. She thinks the earth is untouchable, but she will learn." He raised his staff, the runes along its surface glowing brighter. "They will all learn." The beasts roared, their voices shaking the chamber as the trickster's power surged. Deep within his lair, the shadows began to writhe once more, their movements faster, more deliberate. And far beyond, in the realms of gods and men, the winds began to shift. Amadioha stepped lightly through the streets of Oyo, his senses heightened. The city hummed with life. Vendors called out their wares, drums beat in steady rhythms, and the air carried the aroma of roasted yams and palm wine. Yet beneath this vibrancy, he felt something else, a quiet force, sharp and deliberate, brushing against the edges of his divine perception. It was Shango. The presence was impossible to miss. It loomed, steady and unyielding, like a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. Amadioha paused in the shadow of a towering baobab tree, his eyes narrowing as he focused. A faint trace lingered in the air, a residual energy unlike his own. Where his power moved like lightning, quick, bright and sharp, Shango's carried the slow burn of fire, simmering with restrained fury. He closed his eyes, reaching inward. The ability to trace divinity was not one he often used, but now it was necessary. Slowly the world around him dimmed, the sounds of Oyo fading into a distant hum. In the void, streaks of energy appeared, pale threads of power crisscrossing the city like veins. Among them, one shone brighter than the rest, a deep crimson trail that pulsed in time with a heartbeat. Red lightning. Amadioha opened his eyes and followed the trail, his movements deliberate but unhurried. The path led him beyond the bustling streets and toward the hills that overlooked the city. Here, the air grew heavier, charged with anticipation. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward him, as if the land itself acknowledged what was to come. At the peak of the hill, he stopped. The crimson trail vanished, its energy dissipating into the sky. He scanned the area, his gaze sharp and calculating. The air was alive with Shango's presence, but the god himself remained hidden. "I know you're here," Amadioha said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of authority. The wind carried his words, but there was no response. He stood still, waiting. Moments stretched into silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of drums. Then a voice, deep, smooth, and laced with amusement, echoed from the shadows. "You're trespassing." Amadioha turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. "So the great Shango speaks." The voice laughed, low and unhurried. "And the Igbo god of thunder walks uninvited into my territory. Bold but foolish. I come with purpose," Amadioha said, his tone steady. "Not to provoke, but to seek your aid." "Seek my aid?" Shango's voice shifted, closer now. "Strange. I didn't think a god like you would beg." "I don't beg," Amadioha replied sharply. "But the coming war is bigger than us, Shango. The gods of this world will need to stand united." From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, his presence commanding. Shango's tall frame was cloaked in the deep red of the Yoruba royalty, his double-headed axe resting casually on his shoulder. His eyes burned with a fiery intensity, his grin sharp enough to cut through the tension. "United?" Shango said, his tone dripping with mockery. "And who decided you were the one to unite us?" Amadioha met his gaze evenly. "The signs are everywhere. The balance of the cosmos is faltering, and something far worse than us is coming. If we don't act together, it will destroy everything, gods and mortals alike." Shango tilted his head, his grin fading slightly. "And you think you're the one to lead this charge? What makes you so sure you can handle what's coming?" Amadioha hesitated for a moment, then said, "Because I have seen what the enemy is capable of. I have fought their creations, witnessed the destruction they bring. This is not a fight any of us can win alone." Shango studied him, his expression unreadable. Then, with a sudden burst of movement, he closed the distance between them. Amadioha didn't flinch, his stance firm, as Shango stopped just a step away. "You're serious," Shango said, his voice lower now, almost thoughtful. "But let me ask you this. If it comes down to it, will you sacrifice your pride for the greater good? Or will you cling to it, like so many gods before you?" Amadioha's eyes narrowed. "If it means saving this world, I'll do what I must." Shango's grin returned, but there was no humor in it. "We'll see." Without warning, he moved, fast as a strike of lightning. His foot lashed out in a flying kick, aimed directly at Amadioha's chest. But Amadioha was faster. He sidestepped at the last moment, his movements fluid and precise. Shango landed lightly, turning to face him with a look of approval. "Not bad," Shango said, his voice laced with excitement. "But I've heard you rely on your thunder too much. Show me what kind of warrior you are without it." "Fight me without your power, Amadioha. Real hand-to-hand combat," Shango said. Amadioha exhaled slowly, his body relaxing as he took a measured step back. "Is this what you want? To test me?" Shango shrugged, spinning his axe in his hand before planting it firmly in the ground. "Call it curiosity. If you want my help, you'll have to prove you're worth it." Amadioha's lips curved into a faint smile. "Very well." Both gods shifted into fighting stances, the air around them crackling with unspent energy. The city of Oyo lay beneath them, blissfully unaware of the clash that was about to begin. As they squared off, Amadioha's mind calmed. He had expected the battle of divine power, and not hand-to-hand combat. Even at that, he still was worried. Orunmila had warned him to teleport them both to the planet at the edge of the universe if they were to clash, because their divine clash could split the planet in half. He did not want their clash to affect the people of Oyo. He has fallen in love with their way of life, and it seems Shango wants to protect them too, by suggesting a hand-to-hand compact without divine powers. He had come to recruit Shango, not fight him, But he knew now that this was inevitable. Their powers would remain untouched for now. Yet the tension in the air hinted at the storm and fire waiting to ignite. The gods' gazes locked, each one assessing the other. The world seemed to hold its breath as the first clash drew closer. And so as the storm met the fire, the battle began.